Do you ever wonder why some founders get back-to-back investor meetings whilst others just struggle for months? If you're struggling right now despite the effort you put in, I actually found out why. So in this video, I'm going to show you the exact system I've used to help over 120 founders raise $1 million plus rounds by doubling their investor network in just 90 days, even when they didn't think they had a network already. Now, the system has 3 steps, and step 1 is the one most founders skip, because to be honest with you, it feels like admin. But it's the reason why you just never get consistent meetings, and it's one of the most important things you can do in your fundraise to make sure you get as many investor meetings as possible. So step 1, in your fundraise, I've seen that you're most likely to be in 2 buckets. One, you have a bunch of connections, but they're scattered across LinkedIn, email, WhatsApp, old jobs. It's not tracked anywhere. You don't feel like you have any stability or structure in there, and a lot of them just get lost. The second bucket is you just assume that you have no network and that you don't know any VCs, and therefore you're not going to be doing anything. Now, my client Kimberly, she actually had this exact same problem when it came to her fundraise. She was stuck in a fundraise. She wasn't getting any meetings with investors, and she just kept telling me, I don't have a network. I can't get enough investor meetings. And she was ready to really quit at that point, if I'm being honest. But when we actually structured her network, so LinkedIn, email, past colleagues, even personal connections, for example, what happened is she started booking quick catch-up calls. And what she realized is that she actually did have a network. And just like yourself, you do have a great network. All it was is it was just invisible because it wasn't organized, and she didn't know who to speak to, when to speak to. So when we did this, within a week, she actually found some warm connections she had completely overlooked. One of them was a former colleague who'd actually worked with angels. And then there was another one, which was a family friend, for example, who was close to someone. And we just carried on doing it. And what happened is those conversations turned into more conversations, which turned into warm intros. And then by the time she actually raised her round, she met 40 plus investors and raised $1 million plus in the end. And that's the whole point of step 1. If it's not written down and you're not talking to the people and you're not being structured in your CRM, your network doesn't exist. And it's never going to exist when you need it. So we need to get structured in how you do that. But how do you do this yourself then? Well, for step 1, over the 90 days that we're looking at, this will be done in the first 1 to 2 weeks. So here's what I want you to do. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to sweep your entire world. So LinkedIn, connectors, email threads, past colleagues, friends, advisors, socials, all of those kind of things. Pull out anyone who potentially could introduce you to someone later. Then what I want you to do is I want you to put them into one place. So you can call it a spreadsheet, a CRM, whatever it is. Just one place where you can have them. And then for each person, I want you to add a quick note. Who they are, what they do, who they might know as well is probably beneficial as well. And then do the part that everyone skips. Book catch-up calls with every single person. Your goal should be at least 5 catch-up calls every week. Because until you actually speak to people, you don't know who's willing to help, who's connected to your space, and who's just a dead end. And only then can you really understand what's happening in your network. So step 1, organize your network that you already have and then reactivate it. Before we delve into step 2, just quickly, I've built out an AI tool that actually helps you build your network even faster. So if you want, just comment AI down below to get it. You'll get multiple tools, not just about networking, but the networking tool gives you 10 plus investors at a time to add to your investor list, and then potential warm intros into them as well. So that's really beneficial for you. But back to the system, let's focus on step 2. So once you've got that list and you've started having those catch-up calls, the biggest mistake founders make after that is they treat every conversation like a dead end. And that's where your network stops and never increases. And when that happens, you'll never get the volume that you need to get the warm introductions at scale to successfully raise. So step 2 is all about how we solve that. Because what happens is most founders speak to their network and no one's willing to give them intros. And it's because they're doing the same mistake over and over again. And that's really what step 2 is, of how we solve that. And it's exactly like asking someone to marry you on the first date. Imagine if you did that. Even if you're a great person, if you just on that first date you said instantly, I want to marry you, the other person's just going to be thinking, wait, that's so transactional. Is that all you wanted me for? You just want to get married? You don't want to build a connection with me? You don't even like me? You just want to get married to me? Why will they ever go on a second date with you? Why will they ever help you in any way if they just saw that you were being that transactional? And the big problem that founders make, and investor intros are the exact same, when someone introduces you, they're potentially risking their reputation. So they won't do it for a stranger, and they definitely won't do it for someone who's not actually really trying to build a connection with them. They've just spoken to this person because they're asking for intros. And when they realize that's what you're asking for, they'll almost always say no. And that's why you end up thinking you have a bad network, why no one is willing to introduce you, why warm introductions are so hard, because you're being transactional and you're being impatient. So how do you do this then? Well, that's why we need to be more patient and actually do certain things that will make them want to introduce you in the future. So here's the rule I want you to do for every single call that we do in step 1. I want you to front load the value and then make a small, easy ask. So within the front loading of the value, in the first part of the call, your job is to be useful. So you can have a post-it note if you want. I always say that is the best way. What you want to do is you want to share something relevant like a resource, give a helpful perspective on your expertise, or the most important one, actually give them an intro. Your goal is to make them feel like that taking that call is worth it and you're already giving them as much value as possible. The second thing is we want to do is don't ask for investor intros. Remember, this is a 90-day system. First week or two, we've done step 1. Over the next, until 70, 80 days in, you're not asking for investor intros. All you're doing is building a real network. So giving them as much value as much as possible, helping them as much as possible. And then at the end, if you really want to, because asking for investor intros is transactional, but at the end, if you really wanted to, you can say, trying to meet more smart people in the space. Who are 1 or 2 people you think I should speak to next? Because what happens then is that one question turns your network into a tree, because then 1 call becomes 2 calls, which then becomes 4, which then becomes 8, but you're not being transactional at that point because you're giving them as much value as possible. And all you're saying is asking for the same back, but not for because you're doing a funding round, you're just trying to build your network. But what happens is you increase your surface area of luck of finding the people who will introduce you to investors, who are willing to, who have the connections that make sense. So step 1 makes you, gives you a real list of what you're doing. And step 2 is what makes it compound. And this is done over the first 70-ish days. But then step 3 is really how you activate that in the right way to double your investor meetings at the time of your raise. And the biggest problem that I see founders make here is that you try and activate your introductions and slowly. And this is how people end up fundraising for 6 months with dribs and drabs of meetings, where you take 1 meeting this week, maybe 1 the next or 2 the next, and then there's a massive gap, and then suddenly there's 4, and over a 2 or 3 month period, you've maybe had 10 calls, then someone goes on holiday, and you're just constantly restarting the engine, and you can't actually create the momentum that you want. And what's worse, people aren't ready to introduce you, so they end up getting overwhelmed and they actually don't do it either. So you can never really get the volume that you need. I saw this really clearly with a founder I worked with called Charlie. He had a really strong network actually, but his previous raise, it dragged on for months because the intros came in dribs and drabs. The time we raised together, we did it opposite, right? About 2 weeks before we officially started the raise, we were on an activation window. So we're not officially starting the fundraise at that point. All we're doing is we went to every single connector and at once, and we said, we are opening the round on X date. Who can you introduce me to? And that did a couple of things. The first one is who the strongest connectors actually were, but also it lined up the intros so they landed at the same time because everyone knew Charlie's going to be fundraising at this date. I'm going to ask you for those intros at this date. Who can you confirm? We found out who those were. So when the round opened, the meeting stacked. He ended up with 35 plus investor calls and closed a $5 million round because of it. But how do you do this yourself? Well, copy Charlie, really. So 14 days before you officially start your round, after the 70 plus days that we've just spent together doing the other steps, all I want you to do is message every single connector you've spoken to and say, I'm starting a funding round on this date. Here is the list of people we want to speak to. Who can you introduce us to? Then you want to make sure you keep on top of it every couple of days, confirm who they're potentially going to introduce you to, see which ones are saying no, which ones are saying yes. And then a few days before you launch the round, you ask them to make those same intros. And what happens then is that way all the intros will come at the same time because they've been prepped, they've told you who they are, we can be more specific, all intros go all at the same time, and then we have the density of meetings that we need to successfully fundraise. So that's the whole system that you can implement yourself, and it's 3 easy steps. Build the list, compound it with value, activate it in a 7 to 14 day window so that meetings actually stack. And once you do this, you'll easily double your investor network in 90 days, double your investor meetings, and have the volume of investor meetings that you need to raise your round successfully. So if you want to get the AI tools to just make this even faster for you, then comment AI down below to get them. But otherwise, why don't you check out this next video to make sure you fundraise smarter, faster, and on better terms with top tier investors.